Hi, everybody. It's Susan again, and I'm here to talk about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that we're about to have, that we're already having, but technically it's exact on the weekend coming. So you will feel it already. You will have been feeling this very strongly for the last month or even 2 months, because it's within the orb of 10 degrees since the middle of February. And that 10-degree orb continues into mid-June, and it's within the orb of 8 degrees since the 2nd of March, and it continues into the first week of June. And that's quite a tight conjunction for two slow-moving planets like Jupiter and Uranus. And so it's definitely already in play. And we are then going to get the exact on the 20th and 21st. It kind of overlaps those 2 days, and especially then in the sort of North America, South America, you'll feel that strongly on the 20th, and then for the rest of the world, it will be on the 21st. But don't worry about the exact when these are slow-moving planets. The events are already building. And I mean, it's kind of hard to pick it apart compared to the quite historic events that we've been having anyway in the last few weeks. So don't stress too much about the details. I'll give you some dates and degrees, and that will especially apply if you have those specific degrees in your chart. And we'll look sign by sign as we go forward. So just so if you're not familiar with me, I can introduce myself. I am a consulting astrologer. I have been an astrologer since the last Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and I'll talk about that briefly. And I do enjoy my work in consulting astrology. I think that's for me where my gift is strongest. I do these YouTube videos so you get to know me, and also so you can get to know a little bit about what's happening in your life. But of course, if you want some more precise details, then do go ahead and book a session, and you'll find the link below this video. It's a really interesting conjunction, this one. Oh, and of course, I'm working with tropical astrology, whole sign houses. So I beg you, please use whole sign houses if you're not 100% familiar with astrology, because every single time I upload a video, I will get people saying, no, it's not in this house, it's in that house. And that's because you're using a quadrant style house. And that's Placidus, Porphyry, Koch houses, Campana, you name it, whatever house you're using, it's not the whole sign house system. And so if you're not really familiar with astrology, you will find your life simplified, and your understanding will grow more quickly if you simply choose a whole sign house system. And I have a video about that. I'll link that one below as well, so you can understand the difference. It's not that one is better or one is more appropriate or whatever, but it's really that it's just easier to understand. I prefer working with whole sign because it just is far, far more clear. And once you get more adept at astrology, you choose whichever one you want. I used to work with Placidus, and after 4 or 5 years, I just switched over, or longer actually. But anyway, I switched over in 2015, and I have not looked back. Right. So what I wanted to point out was that currently, of course, as we're under this influence, we're already feeling this conjunction. But on the day of the conjunction, we want to think of that as the seed moment of the new cycle. So we think of this as a new 14-ish year cycle. And it's kind of like the birth chart for the next 14 years. And that's why this particular chart for the 21st of April, universal time, is very important. So it happens at 4:50 a.m. In universal time. And so this is something that you'll get an idea or the feeling, let's say, of the energy of this seeding moment, and the themes will touch on the houses that I'm mentioning here as well. So of course I need to see your natal chart to give you more details about that. Please, again, don't ask me in the comments. I have my Venus in Taurus. How will this affect me? Because honestly, it's just not enough information, and that is always going to be that way. You need to see the whole chart because so many factors come into play, and it's I would consider that's bad advice if you're getting advice based on one placement. Sometimes you can just kind of throw away an idea, look out for this or look out for that, but that's hardly a consultation. Anyway, so for this particular chart, we find the ascendant is in Pisces. You can ignore the ascendant. This is just simply the ascendant that comes up spontaneously because I put it for Greenwich Mean Time. And so in the universal time zone, this is the ascendant that comes up. But don't worry about that. It will change depending on where you are. The ascendant depends on where in the world you are. And so anyway, we can consider anyway from the point of this chart that Jupiter and Uranus are ruled by Venus, and Venus is one house behind. So Jupiter and Uranus are ruled by Venus in Aries alongside Chiron, and alongside on the other side Mercury and the North Node conjunct with Mercury retrograding back into the North Node. So the way that I see this is that we are not going to get what we think we're going to get out of this conjunction. So I'm going to tell you a whole bunch of stuff, and then I'd like you to just keep a wide open mind, because Venus is in the 12th house from this conjunction. This also lends a certain amount of impulsiveness, which is it kind of shakes up the energy of Taurus, but so does the Uranus. And that can also add to the quality of impulsive behavior, especially because Mercury is retrograding back into Rahu, or the North Node, in Aries, where there can be things that happen in a way that is not well thought through. So right off the top, regardless of what I say throughout this video, I would like you to keep in mind that it's a really good idea to slow your roll and not jump into something too quickly without expecting that that will change or look really different in the weeks and months to come. And then by 14 years from now, you'll look back and go, oh, right, that's why that went wrong. And so the other factor with this is that we've got Neptune in an opposition to the moon, and that's especially starting on the 20th of April, but it reaches right into the 21st in the exact. So it's an out of sign opposition, but it's well within orb of less than 2 degrees. And Neptune opposite the moon is really hazy. It's either wishful thinking, or it's not seeing things clearly, or it's downright delusional. And it can also just simply represent a highly emotional energy, a highly emotional time. And of course, when we have strong, strong emotions, we know that we are not using our prefrontal cortex, and we're not thinking clearly. And so again and again, I keep repeating through some of my videos, especially about world events, that if you feel strongly emotional about something, you're not really reacting based on evidence or based on facts. You're basing it on your feelings and your opinions. And that's just simply not a wise way to proceed. Jupiter would certainly tell you much the same. And the other thing is that Venus also rules this moon. So Venus is ruling the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, the sun, which has just moved into Venus-ruled Taurus at 1 degree and 32 minutes, and of course the moon in Libra, which has just moved in and is approaching the South Node. Now the moon and the South Node are enemies. They don't get along because the nodes will always obscure the moon. And so there is definitely something in regards to money, relationships, or preferences, or values, which is changing. Now, change is change. That's not a qualitative judgment. It's just change. So in some cases, it will represent a change for the better. In other cases, a change for the worse, apparently, which can later on turn into perhaps the next best thing to ever happen to you. And this is really important to keep in mind, because the moon is in a trine to Pluto, and Pluto itself is squaring the sun at the time of this. I was about to say eclipse, but Uranus Jupiter conjunction. And that conjunction is a very, very destabilizing energy. Again, can shake things up in a way that's really, really constructive, really, really positive. And combine that with the Pluto squaring the sun, and with the moon trining Pluto, and the moon opposite Neptune, we're not really sure what's going on. We're not really sure what is actually happening around us. And there's maybe just a lot, or certainly at the very least, a little bit too much for us to comprehend what's going on. And again, I really recommend that you set some goals, make some plans, have some ideas, and try not to act on them at the very least until Mercury stations direct again after the 25th of April. So let's say about a week or a little bit less than a week, but even more is better after this conjunction. So with Pluto squaring the Sun, these are two fixed signs. So we've got Pluto in Aquarius and the Sun in Taurus, and they are in half a degree apart, basically, just about a half a degree apart. It's an incredibly tight square. And that requires a lot of surrender or a desire for transformation, a need for transformation. And depending on where that is in your chart, which I will describe sign by sign, it's going to shake things up in a really, really big way. So again, independent of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, that Sun square Pluto is a big deal. On its own, it's a big deal. Go back to January when the Sun was conjoining Pluto. That would have been at the end of Capricorn. The Sun conjoined Pluto, and that was the new solar cycle with Pluto. And so now the Sun has moved into its first quarter square. And so this is known as a kind of a crisis of confidence, a crisis of awareness. And it's time to realize what has been going on since January that requires our adjustment, that requires us doing something in a new way, in a different way. In fact, that now that I'm thinking about it, that conjunction happened at the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius, and so that was even more significant because that they both entered into Aquarius very powerfully in January. And that is again very symbolic because now the Sun, of course, is just entering into Taurus, where we find this new energy coming together with Jupiter and Uranus. The other aspect of this that is very important is that this is almost 22, it's in the 22nd degree of Taurus, 2150 of Taurus. It starts at 2148, but I'm putting 2150 here for the perfection. And that is in a very tight, again, less than a degree sextile with Mars. And Mars is ruling Venus, and Venus is ruling this conjunction. So there's a lot of pulling together of these themes. Mars is being ruled by Jupiter, and because it's also ruled by ruling Venus, and Venus is ruling Jupiter, those three planets are playing together, hopefully nicely. We'll find out with time when the dust settles. And so keep this in mind because things are being shaken up, but the shakeup has already begun. It's not like this is surprising to anybody that we're living in these historic times of massive transformation. And go back, if you like, to my video of Mars conjoining Saturn, because that's part of this story as Mars and Saturn started their new cycle of 2 years. And then we're in this new cycle of Pluto squaring the Sun, and then the new cycle of 14 years with Jupiter conjunct Uranus. So if I were with you right now, I would say, any questions? Because I can imagine that this is just a lot of information, but I'm going to try and be practical about this and not really go through all the nitty gritty, because I really want to get down to how this affects each individual. Having said that, I want to point out the last conjunction and even the one from 1941. So we just get a feeling for how these things can change. I'm not going to go through all of them because there has been, of course, every 14 years going back in time, these different conjunctions happening in different places. But let's just go back and have a look. Before I do that, let's just do it this way. I want to reassure you again that this is not necessarily horrible. It can be difficult, and again, especially in worldly events, things can be really challenging. In personal life, it can be very challenging, especially if you have a conjunction, a square, or an opposition to this. If it's a sextile or a trine, You can benefit in different ways from the inspiration, the sense of something new coming in. But there's no way that this will not be unsettling in one way or another. But we are resilient people. We are born from fine stock of generations of people who have gone through way worse adversity than we go through right now. And unless you're actively in a war zone, you will be able to manage what is going on here. And if you're actively in a war zone, I'd be surprised because you're probably not even getting internet to watch me right now. So, and if you are, God bless you, and I wish you all the best. But I just want to point out that Jupiter, without exception, always wants to give us what is good for us in terms of our spiritual growth. And so the more that you cling to life in a material way, and the more that you look at the stuff of your life, whether that be a person that you want to cling to, because let's face it, these are fixed energies, Taurus and Leo and Scorpio and Aquarius, which are all in play here in the conjunctions, squares, and oppositions. Those fixed energies don't give up easily. There's stubbornness, there's a resistance to change, there's a grasping and a holding on, often way, way, way past the sell-by date. And so Jupiter will come in, and it seems on the surface that everything is going to hell in a handbasket because now you've lost XYZ, or you have had to change circumstances of some sort. But it is not in any way to be perceived as some kind of punishment, um, or any kind of basically when you're thinking about your life in whatever situation that you are in right now, think about it in terms of how can I grow from this? And I'm growing psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And if you resist this kind of change, you're not growing psychologically, you're not growing emotionally, and you're not growing spiritually, and you remain an adult child, and you keep expecting things to happen because you want them to happen rather than taking action to get engaged and get involved in your own life. So this is the important thing to recognize. We have to play a role. This energy is just manifesting as a kind of a symbol. It's not causing things to happen to us. Never. It's a metaphor for what we're already understanding. There's no separation between us and anything else in the universe. And so we're responding to this energy in the way that we're already resonating. So keep your vibe high, stay clear, stay aware, and don't play the victim card, because that will have you sitting on your couch for the next 14 years waiting for something nice to happen just because Jupiter said it could be nice. Jupiter does the thing that is right for you, so you grow on your path to where you need to be in this lifetime. It's similar to the nodes in the sense that the only thing that matters is that you grow and evolve through this lifetime. Same kind of energy with Pluto. And comme par hasard, we have Pluto squaring the sun, which is shaking up that energy of consciousness itself, your consciousness. Again, don't wait for everybody to wake up and feel like you do or have the same opinion as you. Your waking up, your consciousness awakening is available to you at any moment. And it's not because some astrological configuration comes along and changes that things will happen to you. I want you to think of the Uranus-Jupiter blending, let's say, as combining that energy of Uranus, which is about sudden change and this kind of inspiration or insight that you can get, this really deep insight into something, this change around your whatever is happening now that might turn around 180 degrees. Again, you'll go in one direction, then find yourself going in another direction, and it was entirely unexpected. But when you look back on it, you think, well, actually, and this is something Robert Hand said to me, and I really want to emphasize that. I just saw him last Tuesday again. I've seen him for a couple of readings, and I really value his opinion. And he said to me, not this time, but before, that, Jupiter will always put you in the place you need to be to live your life. And I'll show you a personal example in a minute. Because that's the role of Jupiter. It's wisdom. It's accumulated wisdom over time through change. So the more we resist change, the less we have access to this wisdom. And we're not here for nice things. We're not here for cars and houses and everything to be picture perfect. None of that is important. If you go back 1,000 years, nobody had any of those things. And life was just as meaningful. even go back farther than that, and none of these things were available to us, and life was perhaps even potentially more meaningful. And so think about that, insights coming from shocks and turnarounds and things happening in your orbit or with people around you. Again, it depends on how this is showing up in your natal chart. And then Jupiter itself is about, expansion. It can be too much of a good thing as well. So Jupiter expanding is not necessarily beneficial. And think in terms of often it is beneficial, but not necessarily materially. So again, it's beneficial for the long run. We have to keep a long run picture. And by the way, that sextile between Jupiter and Uranus and Saturn, speaking of planning for the long run, is still actually active. It's at the end of what I would give it to maximum 7 degrees, but I prefer 6-degree orb, but for a sextile, the tighter, the more meaningful, but it's still very much in play. And it's the same kind of degree between Saturn and Mars. So we're at the end of that tightness or this heaviness or this restriction, but Saturn is there just kind of on its way out the door, kind of checking in, if you see what I mean. It's like as Jupiter is moving away from the sextile with Saturn, Saturn is still there with an ear to the door or just checking in, making sure the kids are all right. Right. So I wanted to be sure that I mentioned that because I want you to think big picture. That's one way you can look at these outer planet transits. It's big picture stuff. It's not the minutia of life. It changes the cycles of your life. It changes the quality of the way that you live your life, not necessarily the details. The details will come through the faster moving planets, like the moon will come along and trigger something. Mercury or Venus or Mars will come along and instigate something. But these planets create a background. It's a new way of showing up. And your life will change dramatically, but you won't necessarily know how this is unfolding until time moves on. And both, of course, represent some sort of freedom. And here we have that symbolism in the sign of Taurus, which is around this quality of everything to do with what sustains us and our earthly things, whether it be food, our material comforts, our material needs of all kinds, our family as well, in terms of what connects us to what we thrive with, what we can get support from. Our values, this is really huge, changing values, changing the way we see ourselves and in our own worth and our own value, changing the way we might see life itself. Do we value life in a way that supports all life, or are we taking favorites? I'd say that's not a very Jupiterian way of looking at life, and given that we are not separate, there is no separation between us and anybody you might hate or disagree with politically, or don't like the color of, or whatever. There is no difference. And so you're hating on yourself. So make sure that you keep that in mind as you grow through this change, and don't allow yourself to fall into this trap of victimization of something happening to you. That goes forever, but especially now as we're in these times of really rapid change. Right, let's go back over a bit of history, very short. I don't want to do a whole lot of this. I will, again, look at political stuff going on. I've been asked many, many times, and I do love doing that stuff, but I am more tied to what I want to do for my clients. So here we are with Jupiter Uranus, 1941. So a lot of people are freaking out because this happened in 1941, also in Taurus. So we do have some resonance, but things are very different, and I want to show you how they're different. So this can be a similar vibe in terms of war. It can be a similar vibe in terms of how people are struggling over resources, for example. It's worth mentioning that, so this happened in May of 1941. That was the 8th of May, universal time in the middle of the night. And so this, in this particular chart, and again, it's only relevant for London, but of course, Britain was a big part of this Second World War, that has Mars in the ascendant. And it is ruled by Saturn in Taurus, which is there right alongside the sun. Overnight on the 9th, 8th to the 9th, the sun and Saturn were exactly conjoined. And we also have Mercury alongside that. What is exchanges, financial exchanges, uh, diplomatic exchanges? What are we fighting over? Whose money are we fighting over? Whose property are we fighting over? Right next door, we have Venus, who rules this eclipse. Now we have Venus in Mars ruled Aries. Mars itself is much weaker than a Mars in Aquarius, for example. Mars in Aquarius has a big picture sense of purpose. Mars in Pisces has a much more spiritual sense of purpose, or a sense of potential confusion around the sense of purpose, because it doesn't operate so well in the material world. It's much more geared to what is a higher calling, a higher meaning, let's say, action based on higher meaning. So this conjunction happened with Venus conjunct the conjunction that she rules. And this massive stellium in Taurus tells us a lot about what was going on in the fourth house, which is all about territory, all about land and property and the people, etc. All of that in this, along with the ruler of the sign, which makes it very, very strong, very intense and strong energy. Not to mention that the conjunction itself was squared by Mars. Now, keep in mind, we're not dealing with the same kind of energy. We're dealing with there's an energy of brinksmanship at the moment, but I'm not so sure that this energy is as powerful as this was in 1941. So in 1941, we had in February, so of course, a couple of months before, we still have the orb. Remember, this is still, it's becoming active. There are other things, other factors that also come in play. But in February of that year, we had Operation Barbarossa, where Hitler had no better idea than to declare war on two fronts and declare war on the Soviet Union, which is in modern times, including in Russia, in the Russian Federation, which is not the Soviet Union. Please stop calling it that. It is not the same place, not the same vibe at all. It is always going to be the most powerful military force, and especially when it comes to land battles. And so Hitler decided quite spontaneously to declare war on Russia at the same time as it was fighting the Allies. Now, later in the year, because the US hadn't joined the Second World War yet, later in the year, in December, still part of this very new cycle, we had in early December, Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor event, which is when the Japanese Air Forces attacked Pearl Harbor. And that is what is described historically. We know this now. This is not my opinion. This is known as a LIHOP. And LIHOP means let it happen on purpose. And those events are designed by design to overcome resistance to going to war. So at that time, 1941, Americans did not want to go to war. Right now, most Americans do not want to go to war. The American people are not interested in all these wars. They wouldn't mind having a decent road or a decent school or a decent hospital to go to. So the government is a different kettle of fish. And so because the government at the time wanted to get involved in this war, which we're already participating in, let's say, behind the scenes with Standard Oil providing fuel to Hitler's army through Switzerland, and they were providing support surreptitiously to the Allies already, playing both sides, why not? And so this energy was already building. The tension was that the public didn't want to go to war, and there was still this idea that Congress had to declare war in those days, those very quaint old-fashioned days. Nowadays, Congress doesn't bother to get even a look in before wars are declared, before Americans American government, not the American people, take action militarily. So here we have this situation where we have this LIHOP, let it happen on purpose, where there was intelligence. They knew very well, they had lots of warning that Pearl Harbor was going to be bombed, that the Japanese had planned this, and they decided, or somebody decided, not to evacuate. That was a decision taken at the highest levels. Do not evacuate the military base that was going to be bombed. Civilians and military personnel were killed, and of course, material was destroyed. And that was because they needed that event to stir people to action. And I want to keep you aware of these things because these events happen. They've happened recently. They have happened frequently over many, many years. We have these events that are done. They're allowed to happen despite evidence that these things can happen. And so human lives are sacrificed, whether they be military or civilian, but especially civilian, innocent lives are sacrificed in order to provoke a greater response, to get people angry and behind the already set out plans of the government. So keep yourself aware of this as you watch the news, because these things are happening to this day. They have been happening throughout history and quite recently. So I want to mention also that Germany itself is going, and I will talk about Germany in a future video because it's I just can't get my head around what's going on in Germany. But Germany is going through this kind of phase at this moment of self-destructive behavior. There's no other way to describe that. Of course, many countries are. It's interesting that today, where we have the Pluto squaring the sun, we see all these elections around the world, and we're going to see heads of government falling all through this year. Many governments are going to look very different as of 2025. And thank goodness, I should think, because we don't really have much competent governance around the world. It's not one or another, but it's most of them. And so at this point, we have Germany once again, which is embarking down this this path of totalitarianism. By the way, that's not unique to Germany. That's something that's happening, what is called techno-totalitarianism or techno-fascism. We're all going down that road. I'm not going to get into that. Let me just keep moving on. But Germany itself is doing things like just now, yesterday, banning political leaders who, like Yanis Varoufakis, who speak out against what Germany is doing. They are banning anyone who supports Palestine. They have arrested and even deported Jews and Israelis who protest what is going on in Israel. And I mean, you can't make it up. It's just crazy. And so people are being shut down, their money, their source of income being shut down. Germany closed the bank account of about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, of a Jewish organization for peace. And they shut the bank account down. And the headline, quite ungraciously, or rather descriptively, was once again, Germany is taking money from the Jews. And so this rings really, really true. It's a bad look for Germany right now. And so again, watch these countries who, like the UK, like Germany, like the US, like the Axis countries, like Italy. Obviously, Italy, Germany were the Axis states in the war. Look at what's going on in this dynamic. And of course, the Soviet Union, which at the time was pretty much ruled by Moscow, and again, does not equate with Russia today, but it's definitely, there will be some scope of equivalency here. And this is also, keep in mind, why Russia is so tetchy, let's say, about Germany's behavior, because it has been invaded by Germany over and over in history. Yeah, just to say that. Don't forget France. Of course, France is in this story as well. Now, I want to go back a little bit more recently, and that is to 1997. I'm not going to show you that chart because I forgot to make it, to be perfectly frank, but that was February 2027. No, not at all. The February 1997, there was this Uranus and Jupiter conjunction at 5 degrees of Aquarius. Well, guess who's coming up to 5 degrees of Aquarius? So in February 2027, 40 years later, 30 years later, we have Pluto coming to that point. So we're going to see some reference to what was going on in February 1997 and what is coming up in February 2027. This is against the backdrop of all of the other slower moving planets changing signs over the next couple of years as well. So it should be a very interesting thing. Pay attention to what is different. 1997, you will remember, is a time frame where things started to shift quite dramatically in the political world, where people, the notion of left-leaning politics started to be eroded in that year. That was the year where, because the what they stood for started to change, and they started to veer more to the right. So it should be very interesting to see how Pluto deals with that. Over the last 3 decades, the left has no resemblance to what the left meant in the 90s and before. And so we're looking at also things like the death of Diana, Princess Diana, what about my marriage? I got married in June that year. That happened in my 8th house, just FYI, the house of marriage. So things like this can happen. And that particular conjunction was sextile Pluto in Sagittarius. And that's why it's interesting when Pluto gets back to that point. Because of that sextile, it's also going to be completing now a trine to its original position, and in conjunction with those planets many moons before. And that also was trining Mars in Libra. So a very different kind of energy. I don't have the chart again, as I just wanted to point that out to you. And I'm going to come up to more recent times now. And we're going to start with the very first Uranus and Jupiter conjunction of 2010, which happened at 0 degrees of Aries, 017 of Aries. And I just want to bring in a little anecdote before I look at this chart. I have a 29-degree Mercury in Pisces, 29 Pisces, which is conjoined my daimon. Daimon is the part of spirit. Robert Hahn calls it the part of genius. I tend not to use that because it sounds a bit puffed up, but he likes that one. He says our society only recognizes genius. They don't really notice spirit. Anyway, what it means, the daimon is what you are bringing with you and what you already have as a gift, what a talent. Anyway, so that's where my Mercury and daimon is at 29 Pisces. And that particular year, I got involved with somebody who I thought I was having a relationship with, and also who I thought I was going to enter into a business with. We were going to start a retreat center for yoga, Ayurveda, kind of a really wonderful retreat center in India. And it turned out that this man was a complete con man and lied to me, and was also bipolar. I didn't realize these things until much later. But anyway, there was a whole big shenanigans around this. And of course, Mercury represents money. That's in my 9th house, that Mercury. And of course, this was happening in my 10th house. And that's, of course, your career and your social status and your social standing and your sense of ambition, for example. So that's where that started. And that happened, of course, in June of 2010. That first hit, let's say, at 0 degrees of Aries. Then because there was a retrograde, and this is perhaps our saving grace this year, is that there's only one pass. There's only the one pass. But this time there were 3 passes. So because there was a retrograde, we had this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And if you know your chart, look where you have Aries. Very important. Mars was in Virgo at the time, and Mercury, which rules Virgo, is up in Venus ruled Taurus. Venus is in Cancer, and Venus herself is ruled by that moon, which is ruled by Mars up in Aries. And so a lot of tie-ins with those energies of money, of communication, of hopes for the future, of security, and so on and so on. And so anyway, all that to say that when we have these conjunctions and they affect us directly, by the way, this is also in a trine to my ascendant in Cancer, and Venus was approaching my ascendant in Cancer. And so when we have these things directly involving our own experience, our own chart, and the nodal axis, just to boot, was also squaring my midheaven. So this is not to say that it's going to happen to you. That's why I point these things out. It's not going to happen to you necessarily. The sun was approaching my Jupiter, I just realized. Anyway, so the point being that things that happen can be really, really disturbing. It starts out as some, in this case for me, as something which was just the dream of a lifetime. Threw myself into it, threw money into it, crap ton of money, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I'm going to come back to what Robert Hand said. And this is all really fresh because I just spoke to Robert, so I really it's just resonating again. And so he said, you know, you were probably going down the wrong path. And when you're going down the wrong path, Jupiter will course correct. It will give you a nudge or a slap upside the head until you go on the right path. So let me take you now to the next one in 2010. Now, 2010 was an interesting period anyway, because that was when things started to get a little bit fuzzy and edgy around the economy, because since 2008, late 2007, 2008, when Pluto moved into Capricorn, we had quite a lot of disruption financially. People were really struggling in many, many ways still, and that was ongoing. Now we have, in September of 2010, now we have the second hit. And this is when it happened almost, well, within a degree of my Mercury and exactly on my diamond. Now the nodes are almost exactly squaring my 9-degree midheaven. Remembering my chart is different. I have Aries in 10, and this is happening in 9. I'm just giving you an example to see how these things work out. This time that was in opposition to the sun. Mercury is once again in, Virgo is once again solicited, because now we have Mercury and the sun. Mercury is very strong in Virgo. That's my third house. Venus and Mars coming together. So this was where the relationship started to heat up, and things got really interesting because it looked like we were really going to gel. There was really some project on the way, but hey ho, there's Saturn, and it is squaring the nodes. And Saturn square the nodes always says, are you really sure about this? Is this a good idea? Is this a good plan? Saturn was coming up to an opposition with my midheaven, and of course conjoining my IC. This is also in a square to Pluto, which was on the North Node. The North Node and Pluto would have met soon after. So lots and lots of things coming up. And the reason that I point this out is because at the time, I was going to see a number of different astrologers. I always, every year, at least get 2 readings. And from astrologers that I like. In those days, I was much less apprised of astrology, and I was very badly advised, to say the least. I had a lot of people sort of blowing sunshine up my wazoo and saying, it'll be great. Oh, it's so amazing. Oh, look at all this amazing stuff. Because people were not realizing, and again, this is what I realized, the importance of rulership and the importance of the caliber of the planetary dignity in the chart. And this is why I use these techniques myself and with my clients. So the point is now, as we go to the third one, by this time, now the third one is happening now at the beginning of 2011. By this time, I realized, oops, I don't think I'll see my money again. Things are starting to go very, very wrong. And the person starts to become very unstable. The whole situation starts to melt down. And now we have the nodes coming up to square the original conjunction at 0 Aries. You see, so that's going to trigger the original plan. And so always have a kind of a couple of options for your plans, and take your time. And so by this time, I also realized that I was getting very bad advice. And I started to look elsewhere for people to give me better advice. And I started to find out why the advice was so poor. Again, we still have this connection with Pluto on the North Node, huge change. That happens in my 7th house of relationship and business partnership, squaring the 9th house. And this is really important because those factors are also part of this conjunction. That's what I want you to keep in mind. It's not just about Pluto Uranus. So if you hear people saying, oh, it's going to be amazing, don't worry, it's going to be fab, there was potential for that, and it will also depend on how you handle all of the other energy that I pointed to at the very beginning of this video. Here we have that in a trine to a Venus not in good dignity in in Scorpio. That would be my 5th house, if you're following. And so it's still a trine to Venus, it's still Jupiter, it's still Uranus, but man, can that ever cause problems by being overly optimistic, not seeing things in the way that is clear and let's say helpful. So there's a lot of pie in the sky thinking. We also have Saturn in Libra, very strong dignity. When Saturn is in Libra, we like to see Saturn in Libra, and that is in a square to this almost new moon, just a waning new moon, which is conjunct Mars, in very strong Mars in Saturn ruled Capricorn. So again, remember, that's my 7th house in my personal story that I'm describing about this massive turnaround. I want to call it a turnaround when I gave this con man pretty much everything I had. So just to say that these things can happen, and this is why I really emphasize caution. I emphasize that some things feel good, too good to be true, and you will know because your body is telling you it's not okay. And I have to admit, I was getting messages internally, energetically through my physical body. I was getting a lot of feelings of resistance that were coming through all of this very rapid, very dynamic, very much desired change. And that is why I overrode all of those actual feelings and I went with the pie in the sky dream. And I'm asking you right now, if you're in a situation like this, to really look at what is going on and think, how do I feel about this? What is not what is my opinion on it, but what is my body literally telling me about what's going on? So I want to come back to this moment and we're going to go sign by sign. This might be a long video, but I think these are very extraordinary transits and very helpful to work with in a constructive way. So let's have a look first at Pisces, simply because I'm too lazy to change the chart and it's all set up exactly like that. Happens to be a Pisces rising for universal time. And if you're in the UK or Ireland, or Portugal for that matter too. So here we are with a Pisces rising, with Mars and Saturn having just recently met, and Neptune there. And that means that Neptune is in opposition with the moon on the 20th and the 21st. Briefly, so the moon will quickly move on. That opposition will no longer be in orb at all very soon after this conjunction, but it's just worth pointing out because for Pisces, this is happening both in the 1st and 7th house axis of self and other, but also with the moon now, along with the south node, which is kind of like its nemesis, taking away all of that, that energy, and that is in the 8th house of other people's money, of intimacy, of sometimes challenges and rapid change. And that's ruled by Venus in the 2nd house, again, with regards to money. Anyway, Venus does symbolize money, but especially in the 2nd house. And she's ruled by that Mars, which is in your 1st house, Pisces. So this applies whether, especially if you're Pisces ascendant, but also for the sun and the moon in Pisces. Okay, so for tropical Pisces. And so you do have some tension here that needs to be dealt with. This is anyway very much connected to Saturn being in the 1st house for Pisces, and for the nodes to be in the 2nd and 8th house all this time, where also we find Mercury retrograding through the 2nd house. So money, how you earn money, where you get your support, issues around your values, what you think are very important, are really, really highlighted right now. And then we go into your 3rd house, and the 3rd house is very much about how you communicate things, how you connect with people. We have not just the conjunction there in your 3rd house, which also might involve siblings as well, things going on in the life of your siblings, the life of your neighbors, or in your neighborhood, and that you're having to adjust to, for example, or that you're somehow dealing with in one way or another. The 3rd house is also money. It's money exchanges. It's also ideas. It's writing books. For example, Mars is in your 1st house. It rules your 9th house of publishing. And then you've got that conjunction in Venus, in the Venus ruled Taurus, and Venus herself is in the Mars ruled Aries in the 2nd house of your self-worth and values. With Chiron there's something that you're healing around those things as well with Venus. And that's an ongoing story. All the recent videos have been talking about that since February, basically. So you can look back on those for more details. And then, of course, we have the sun now newly in your third house. So there's a big focus now pulling your awareness into the third house, because Jupiter is your ruler. And later in 3 weeks or so, the sun is going to be crossing over your Jupiter in conjunction with your Jupiter. And that is going to be probably, yeah, maybe a little bit more than 3 weeks. I've forgotten the exact date, but that will be a really interesting moment because that pulls a lot of the energy there into your third house of your willpower and your skills and what you need to do, how you need to do it. The sun is squaring Pluto, and it looks like this is a game changer for you. This can be about your career. It can be about it can be about men in your life in any kind of way. And it can be something also to do with travel, because the third house represents travel or moving around in some form or another, as well as the 12th house, which is long distance travel. And that's where we have Pluto squaring. And so there can be some real reference there to moving, traveling for some maybe spiritual purpose, or for a need to travel to earn money through foreign resources, for example, foreigners or foreign lands where you can find a source of income. And with that sun in the third house, there's going to be a lot of communication around these things and a lot of insight with that Jupiter and Uranus conjunction there. Jupiter is very good for Pisces. Again, it depends on your natal Jupiter. Is your natal Jupiter in good dignity to begin with? Because Jupiter rules Pisces, but it doesn't necessarily always bring you the goods, as it were. And that will determine the result of the transit for you. Uranus is a wild card, and it has been in your third house since April, May of 2018. It's not a new thing. And this is an energy now which is you got familiar with. It's a change of opinions around things, a change of goals, a change of what makes you motivated, what you feel like you are able to deal with. You've got new skills, a new drive. And so just like that transit that I had, where this transit was over my 10th house, I became an astrologer. I chose to do a completely different career. You might have the same idea. It's like, oh, wow, I really want to do this thing now. This is a whole different way of communicating. It's a whole different way of earning money. So your income is changing, your way of getting skilled up, for example, or finding motivation is changing around this time. So this can be a fantastic opportunity for you to develop your new revenues, new sources of income based on, and that can also involve teaching too, but communicating of some kind, learning, teaching, traveling, all of that third house stuff, which is so very activated for Pisces right now with your ruler in the third house. Yeah, good luck, Pisces, with all of that. I think this could prove a very, very big opportunity for you. All right, so we're just going to switch it up now and move on to Aries. And Aries, this conjunction is happening in your second house, and it's ruled by Venus in your first house. Venus herself is ruled by your ruler, Mars, in your 12th house. And so there is something here that's pulling in perhaps a change of awareness around either foreign lands or foreign people, and how you want to operate based on income. You might be able to grow your income, or what feels like support for you, or what feels like maybe a change in values based on either something that is from a faraway place, or what you might consider to be your unconscious desires that become conscious as your ruler now moves through the 12th house and activates that. This can be, for example, a recognition of ways that you've been doing things kind of against the grain that are not really working for you, and it just gives you an opportunity to change that. Now, again, watch that Saturn and Mars conjunct video that I did last week, because that conjunction speaks to similar things. But because Mars is playing an important role in the rulership of Venus, but also the rulership of your ruler, meaning Mars is playing that role of rulership here of both the Venus that is ruling this conjunction, but also of the North Node, Mercury, and Chiron. It is a very strong impulse for you. So this especially will be strong if you have anything around the later degrees where we find it would be a semi-sextile, let's say. So if you've got 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 degrees of Aries, you will be in a semi-sextile to both Mars as well as this conjunction. And but even still, I should think that you have been affected one way or another in these past couple of weeks so powerfully, Aries, that this will be something that just adds the icing on the cake, as it were. Now we've got the sun moving into the second house, and that does put a lot of focus for you on money issues. It's in a square to Pluto in the 11th. And when the sun squares from the 2nd to the 11th, we definitely are dealing with money here. This can be money in terms of how you earn money from work that you do, especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're your own boss, for example. And that is new opportunities that you're getting in terms of money. It can be investments. It can be your property in terms of movable property. The second house is stuff you can move around, like your car or valuables. The fourth house is property that you can't move around, except in wartime when you move the borders. Third house is borders. You get the picture. And so we have this square from Sun to Pluto, which pulls in your sense of your capacity to earn, your desire for earnings, what you want to base that on, what's your value behind that. And Pluto is changing your vision for your future. It's changing your sense of goals and maybe even also friendships and alliances, and especially so because now we have Pluto in a trine to the moon. Moon is in your 7th house, where we also find the South Node. South Node has been there since the summer of 2022, even 2023, July, and it's going to be there until January. So there's a big story here that is continuing, that is the beginning of a whole new range of friendships and associations with people, aspirations for the future, visions for your life going forward, potential for income coming from new sources. And you're being inspired in this second house to find new creative ways of doing all of that. Now, the one challenge here is that your ruler is in the 12th house, and it has to be said that this can also potentially lead to loss. And it's important you understand that, because if you watch my little spiel about what happened in my case, certain factors come into play where there are issues that need to be looked at in detail. It's not enough that Jupiter Uranus is in your second house of money. That will mean that there's a change of money that can go either way, especially because your ruler is in the 12th house and Venus is in your first house of ruled by that Mars. And so Venus also depends on that Mars, and this conjunction depends on this Venus, who is with a retrograde Mercury and Chiron in Aries. So I'm just saying, slow your roll, Aries. Don't do like I did and jump in and just wish that everything would sort itself out. But really examine things quite powerfully. Wait for Mercury at the very least to go direct, and perhaps even wait until a couple of weeks have gone by, and perhaps even until Venus is well into the second house, where then everybody's at home. Then in May, you're going to have Mars in your first house of yourself, in your house of its rulership. You'll have Venus in Taurus, where she is happy, and that will make all the difference, especially if you're dealing with money at this time. All right, so Aries, good luck with all of that. And I'm going to move on now to Taurus, the star of the show. And Taurus, this, of course, is going to affect you personally. This will be very, very strong, especially for all fixed signs, but particularly for Taurus, because it's very personal to you. And especially so if you have any planets between, let's say, 18 to 19 degrees and say 24 degrees of Taurus. And that is if your birthday is around this time, any time from since the date actually matches the degrees, I can say the same thing. So if your birthday is about the 18th of April till about the 24th or so of April, this is for sure happening in conjunction with important parts of your chart, because the sun will be involved in this, and the sun, especially so if it's on the day. And the sun will be in your first house. And your ruler, Venus, is in your 12th house. Now, you can also, just like the Mars ruled Aries, you can just take note of that, because your ruler is not in a place that you're able to access very easily. That it can be with reference to foreigners and foreign lands and going abroad, making money from faraway places, especially because Rahu, the North Node, is there, and that often signifies foreigners as well. So that can be fantastic if you do have opportunities from abroad, or from, needing to relocate, for example, for a company that's abroad, or at least very far away, not like the next town over. And so there's a lot of activity there in the 12th house, but that also represents where you might be not dealing with things in a way that's appropriate. And so again, for Taurus, sun, moon, or rising, definitely pay attention to how you're managing yourself, your needs, what you want to do, and the decisions that you make around your social role or your career, because we have Pluto up there in the 10th house squaring the sun in your first house. And that is in a square also to the 7th house of relationships and business partnerships. And then in opposition, Pluto is in opposition to your 4th. The sun is squaring the 4th and opposing the 7th. 4th is your home and family. It's your lineage. It's property that you might own. And again, I would need to see your natal chart to see how this is playing out for you, but it's worth paying attention, because these things will shake up. They will be different going forward. Your career, your social status. Am I married, not married? Do I have kids? Do I not have kids? Do I have new ambitions? Pluto is changing your ambitions, and the sun in the first house is highlighting yourself. What do I want personally? Venus, again, is ruled by Mars. So Venus in the 12th is ruled by Mars. In the 11th house, Mars has just met up with Saturn, which is ruling your 10th house, ruling your 9th house of your purpose and your sense of what you're here for. And it's also ruling that Pluto in your 10th house. And so that Mars-Saturn conjunction of last week matters a lot. And you should definitely watch that video if you haven't already, from last week, about the Mars-Saturn conjunction, because this is all part of an extended story around this conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus in your first house, Taurus. We also have the moon in your 6th house with the south node, and that moon is opposite Neptune in the 11th. And so there may be some questioning around, what kind of job do I do? What am I working towards? I'm not quite sure about that. Maybe not really being very clear on your goals, and that may be an extended period of a lack of clarity, where Neptune moved into your 11th house since 2011, and from 2011 there has been a lot of other transits that are waking that Neptune up. And now with the opposition to the moon, we're not really sure. And so for you, if this is about either a job or your day-to-day life and habits, or colleagues, employees, if you have them, if it's about health issues, then pay attention to what's going on. Because this is very much highlighted at this time. And in a trine to Pluto, there can be something unsettling around health, or around your day-to-day work, or around how you feel about all of those things. Pluto is squaring the sun, which represents also career. It represents yourself, your consciousness, your awareness of self, a very, very physical sense of awareness, but also your consciousness in the sense of your awareness of life itself, awareness of what you're here for, etc. The moon also represents your mother. The sun represents your father. And so this can also be something that's affecting your parents at this time, that you're then, your life is changing because of that, around that, or you're changing and therefore your parents are affected by it, for example. These are possible things. And this conjunction, of course, is changing you in a very dramatic way, and you're going to feel very different. Now, Jupiter in the first house is very inspiring, brings you a lot of sense of can do. I want to move in that direction. And with Uranus, it can be deeply inspirational, but it can also be that you have to respond to something lightning fast. You have to respond to events and deal with those in a really hasty way. And that is in the sextile to Mars, just still within a sextile to Saturn, kind of in a sextile to Neptune. And so there's a whole lot of uncertainty and instability built into this. So take your time, enjoy the sense of something new coming along the pipeline that you're ready for, that you're going to grow through, but don't necessarily jump into action, because you might actually either bite off more than you can chew, Taurus, or you might find that it's all unclear and you're still not ready to deal with it. And especially if it has something to do with a career choice. Now, again, we don't always have the luxury of time, so you might not know exactly what your career choice is. But nonetheless, if you can, take some time and listen to the introduction to see, again, some more details overall about how this might be affecting everybody. So you're going to be shaken up because you're a fixed sign, and it sometimes takes a lot of rocking the boat before you change. And so you can really welcome this in. It's definitely an opportunity. And you'll feel then when your ruler, Venus, moves into your first house in a couple of weeks, you're going to feel a lot more settled. You're going to have Mars in the 12th house, which might still have you churning unconsciously, or again, working at a distance with people. And then Mercury will be direct and things will make a lot more sense. So just using your natural patience, make plans, and then double check, triple check, and see if it's feeling very good to you. You're very good with that, Taurus, to sense physically how things feel. All right, good luck with that, and I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, this is happening in your 12th house. You won't be as powerfully affected unless you have a lot of planets in the same zone. In terms of degrees as this conjunction, or some of the other very active planets. For you, what is much more active is in fact that Saturn-Mars conjunction that was in your 10th house, and changing issues around work and career and your social status. Your ruler is retrograde at the moment. Your ruler is, however, conjunct Venus, which is the ruler of this conjunction. And so that also brings in some element of you in the story, but indirectly. So, and this has a lot more to do with how you see your future, how you see your role in society, and then recognizing that there may be a need for change, either that you need to change yourself spiritually or through your unconscious nature. There may be some nagging health issue, or even potentially a mental health issue that wants attention. As Mercury is backing into that North Node, it's going to affect your sense of what's possible for you in the future. And it does very much bear on how you see yourself in society, in the public, because we're looking at also this Jupiter ruled Saturn, Mars, and Neptune up in your 10th house. The South Node is with the moon in the 5th house, and that moon is opposite Neptune. The 5th house is your desire nature, your sense of creativity, your sense of self-expression. It can be around children, and of course, love affairs. And that's ruled by Venus, which is in your 11th house. So maybe you're finding that there's some new opportunity, a new relationship that you're entering into. Take it slow if that's true, because the planets are a little unsettled right now, and they're not really at home, literally not at home in this moment, and therefore they're not giving you the most clarity. And as the moon is coming up with the South Node, you might lose interest over time. You might start out all enthusiastic and then lose interest. The sun in the 12th house is squaring Pluto in the 9th house. So this can also be, for Gemini, an extremely spiritual moment where you can really have insights into what you feel is your purpose, driven by a higher motive, and driven by a sense of wanting to either teach or counsel or guide. This is a brilliant opportunity for things like astrology, this kind of thing with Pluto in the 9th. Changing your ideas around how you think about things, what you have faith in, what you want to do in terms of a career with that, all that energy up in your 10th house as well in Pisces, which is ruled by that Jupiter in the 12th house. And so there's a whole lot of future in your chart right now, a whole lot of looking forward, and no small dose also of good fortune with the moon in the 5th, with Pluto in the 9th, And then all that energy in the 11th house, including your ruler, although again, I emphasize that your ruler is retrograde and in very impulsive Aries, and it's coming back into the North Node. So think big and don't act quite yet. And I think you'll find that you have some incredible insights to work with. And because you are a flexible energy by nature, Gemini, you're a flexible energy, and this allows you to respond and react and to turn on a dime, as it were. And so you'll benefit quite a lot from whatever these changes are, even if you don't necessarily see them directly play out in your everyday life. But without a doubt, if you especially have those degrees active, 18 to say 24 degrees of Taurus or Scorpio or Leo or Aquarius, you will also for sure feel this energy in one way or another. All right, Gemini, have a good conjunction, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, I am also a Cancer rising, so I'm going to say we are having this eclipse, not eclipse, sorry, this conjunction happening in the 11th house. And so that is the house of the future, the house of what we see for ourselves going forward. It can be a house related to money and how we earn money, especially so because Venus, who's ruling that house, is in the 10th house, and Mars, who is ruling Venus, is in the 9th house, which is a fortunate house, a very lucky house, and ruled by Jupiter in turn. And this is putting all of that energy on work, career, ambition, good fortune. Jupiter in the 11th. Sun represents issues of career and what you might want going forward, can represent men in general, but male figures of any kind, but also the role that you play in your life in terms of the career and so on. And that's already very emphasized by the 9th and 10th houses being quite occupied. But nonetheless, it can be very unsettled energy. And again, it will depend on a number of things. Now we have the moon in a square to Cancer. So it's in the 4th house in Libra, where we find the South Node. The North Node is in the 10th house, where most of the attention for Cancers, Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising is going, especially if you're the rising sign. It'll be much more literal then. So a lot of attention on career, but maybe not so much on home, or there's some kind of uncertainty around home. I'm going to be traveling, for example, for the summer. I'm leaving Spain just as it gets hot. It's too hot for me here and too many tourists. So I'm going to be traveling quite a bit until I come back here in October. And so I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like. I have a vague idea, but I'm not so sure, for example, what that's going to look like. But it suits me and it works really well with my overall long-term plan. So if you're open-minded, if you're quite flexible to things being different for now and sort of testing the waters, this will work really, really well for you. That Jupiter and Uranus can also bring you a lot of connections through new collaborations, new groups, new associations with people, new sources of income. Saturn, Mars, as you would have seen in the video that I did last week, in your 9th house can be something to do with publishing or with your sense of purpose and what your drive is based on, what your future goals are, and how you might want to move forward in that direction. Keep in mind that Neptune is opposing that moon. That's part of the confusion around home. But just the day before, on the 20th, Neptune was opposing the moon in your 3rd house of goals and how to choose and how to move forward. Maybe there's some confusion around that too. So just let it sit, don't stress, and things will definitely start to play out. So the Sun in the 11th house is squaring Pluto, which is in your 8th house. This is a really strong indication that there's another story around money, because Pluto in the 8th house is going to be shaking up what is known as other people's money, or money that you might borrow from somebody, or money you earn from clients, or money that you might get through inheritance or through your spouse's income, or through ways that you're not directly earning it. That can be income that comes through working with other people's money. For example, if you're a financial planner or something like that. And so that's in a square to the Sun in the 11th. So you have this sense of an idea around the future that's very strong, something new that's going to happen. But Pluto in the 8th might have you also having to deal with unconscious blocks. Pluto is pretty much where it's going to be when it stations retrograde. So it's slowing down at this point, and it's only about 10 days away from its retrograde. It's going to be at this degree point. It doesn't get any further in 2024. And so you're dealing with an energy that is, it's already been churning from the eighth house, perhaps unconscious side, or overcoming fear or overcoming patterns around money, around intimacy, around old family stuff, family patterns of some kind. And with that sun squaring it, you are looking at things in a different way. So that could be bringing in a new vision for yourself, a new future for yourself based on what you're changing through that eighth house. Now, the Pluto is also in a trine to the moon at this time, and Pluto is in the eighth, and it's trining the moon in the fourth. And so there might be something, if you are married, for example, if you're working in some kind of intimate partnership, it might be something about how that, either the money side of it or the intimacy side of it, is playing through where you live, how you relate to property, and especially with the moon being your ruler, how you feel about being, are you feeling secure? Are you feeling at home? Are you in the right place? Whether that be metaphorically or literally, are you in the right physical place? And so all of this is on the radar, let's say right now, but it's a moment of seeding. And so for Cancers, sun, moon, and rising, but especially for the rising sign, this is very much a new vision for yourself, a new vision for your future that will have you playing a completely different role in the world over the next 14 years. So perhaps that Pluto in the eighth is going to help you churn up some things that you are dealing with unconsciously, through patterns of knowledge and wisdom that you might have even acquired from mystical practices or some kind of metaphysical stuff like this astrology and other occult practices, with the eighth and ninth being very, very full. And especially with the ruler of the 10th being in the ninth, this makes a huge difference, because it's definitely a lot to do with work and money and showing up in a new way in the world. So Cancer, time to leave home, time to get out of your comfort zone. And I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next video. So Leo, this is happening in your 10th house of career. So it's in many ways not exactly the same, but similar to Cancer, where a lot of this action is taking you out into the world in new ways. Your ruler is the sun, and your sun has just moved into your 10th house exactly at the time of this conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus. And so it's just in the second degree of Taurus. And so if you have anything around this, say 18 to 24 degrees of Taurus, but also if your sun is in the early degrees of Leo, this will be really, really impactful for you, because not only is it squaring the sun, but it's opposing Pluto in the seventh house. So Leo, you're in for a really big change, and it is something that can bring you some really new development in career, a whole big new picture showing up in the way that you are doing the work that you're doing. As I mentioned, if you especially have a conjunction, but let's say to a lesser degree, a square or an opposition, in any of the fixed signs around that 18 to 24-ish degrees, even 25 degrees, you're going to change careers, or you're going to change social status in these next 14 years in a way that is highly beneficial. It's really bringing you growth, bringing you positivity, but it may come through something extremely unsettled, including either marital difficulties or partnership difficulties, whether it's a professional partnership or your notion of relationships, how you show up in relationships. This, of course, will depend on your natal chart, but hang in there, because you've also got Saturn, Mars having a new cycle in your 8th house of marriage and intimacy, other people's money, and so on. The Mars is ruling the 9th, which is where your focus is in terms of your purpose, your sense of what you're here for. And then Venus, which is ruled by that Mars, is ruling your 10th, and she is putting a lot of emphasis on something that needs to change, having just met a retrograde Mercury, and also connecting with Chiron at this time. So you're really in for something very big, something very new, and it's going to last over these 14 years. It will become something that is a purpose or a new career that you may not have even realized was open to you. We have the moon in a trine to Pluto from your 3rd house, and we see the south node in the 3rd house. as well since last July, to probably your birthday time last year. And it continues right through till January. So you are anyway changing your goals, and you're changing your sense of what you want to achieve. Maybe you are a bit confused around that with the South Node there, but also now with the Moon having been in opposition to Neptune. And that confusion is temporary, but it is part of the seeding moment of this time. So give it some time. Let yourself, roll with it a little bit. And think back also to January, what was going on in your life in January when the Sun and Pluto met in your seventh house. That would give you some inkling of what's going on here. If there were difficulties in relationships or new things happening in relationship for you in January, it's very likely that you're seeing the consequences of that now, and include that in your assessment of what it is you'd like to do going forward. So this is a really interesting time for showing up out in the world, Leo. Your ruler is in the 10th house, which makes it a really strong placement. It's an angular house, and it gives it extra courage and strength up there in the 10th house. So your focus over the next 14 years is going to be on how you participate out in the world in whatever way, whether it's paid or not paid. Okay, Leo, so good luck with that. Do your best, and I will wish you all the best until I see you in the next video. Virgo, this is happening in your 9th house. 9th house is a wonderful place to have such an event because it's already a lucky house. The Sun itself has just moved in the 9th house, and the Sun loves being in the 9th house. So not only Jupiter, but the Sun really thrive on the energy of the 9th house, which is about showing up in an expansive, high-minded way. And so this is a really brilliant sign. It augurs very, very well for a sense of purpose and a sense of a new way of showing up. Now, it has to be said that the ruler of this conjunction is in the 8th house, where things can be a little bit murky, not as high-minded, let's say, as the 9th, unless you take it down to the level of mysticism and working on yourself psychologically, or working through occult practices, for example. That might be one way, but it may not pan out entirely the way you thought, or especially if it's to do with more material things like money or physical intimacy. Things might be a little bit unstable just at this moment because Venus is not entirely at home with this energy, and she's with Chiron. So there's some need for you to understand where you might feel insecure around these things, and where you yourself need to change in order to access this 9th house ambition or sense of purpose. Nonetheless, your ruler is there as well, alongside Venus and backing up into the North Node. So you're very focused on this area of your chart: other people's money, intimacy, things that open up an understanding of yourself unconsciously through whether it be through therapeutic means or simple awareness or other kinds of metaphysical means. And then your ruler is retrograde, so you're still in the midst of reconsidering something. It's not yet complete, and so do wait until your ruler Mercury is going direct before you really get involved in something or start to take new actions. So we're looking at another sort of week after this happens, this conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. And ideally, even better would be to wait until May, when things are settling a little bit. We've got then Venus moving into your 9th house on top of the Sun, as well as Mars moving into your 8th house, where it's much, much more proactive. Good for intimacy, sexual intimacy as well. Not so great if you have to negotiate something financially, but nonetheless, it gives you much more directness and courage. You have you've got Pluto in a square to your Sun, so from the 6th house to the 9th house. That means that something's changing at work, something's changing around the things that you have to do, your obligations, the stuff you got to get done. Pluto going through your 6th house is an opportunity to really refine how you work every day. It refines your relationship to obligations and duties and the things that you need to overcome, obstacles and contracts that need to be negotiated or renegotiated, for example, with that Mercury retrograde. It's also health. Anything health related, please make sure you take care of that. You do have some good indications in terms of that Jupiter, Uranus, and Sun in the ninth, but nonetheless, Pluto is squaring that Sun, and Venus is in the eighth house. And so there might be anxiety or mental health issues, or it can also be some other niggly health issue that needs to be paid attention to. And if that's the case, jump on it, because then you can turn the ship around in a conscious way and really participate in your own healing with that Chiron there, also in the eighth house, conjoining Venus, which is ruling this conjunction, as well as conjoining your ruler. And your ruler is Mercury is going to come back to that Chiron again in a couple of weeks' time. So you'll get more answers if there is any issues around health and healing. You do have Mars and Saturn along with Neptune in your seventh house, and that Neptune is in opposition to the moon. The degrees are off now because I'm just moving the chart wheel ahead, so don't worry so much about the degrees of the moon. But it was in a tight opposition on the 20th, very exact opposition from your house, from the first house at the end of Virgo on the 20th, was in opposition to Neptune, and now on the 21st is still in opposition but fading now. So something to do with your desire nature around relationships, around yourself, around your body, again, perhaps with reference to health and healing, because that moon is trining Pluto in the sixth house. And then on the 21st, when the conjunction perfects, we have the moon in the second house along with the south node, and that's ruled by Venus in your opposite house, in the eighth house, where your north node is too, where the transiting north node is. So there's definitely lots going on about money, but it could also be with reference to your sense of self-worth. And this might be changing based on these transits, where you have a greater sense of what it is you want to achieve, how you want to show up, what you want to do every day. That might give you a bigger sense of what you feel is important, and that gives you a greater sense of self. Again, I suspect that you'll feel more clear about that. You'll feel more capable as the weeks come towards Jupiter moving into your 10th house, and that will be as of the 25th, 26th of May. So don't fret if things don't feel like they're going anywhere right now. If things turn on a dime and things are shifting right now, roll with it. You are a very flexible sign. Don't let yourself get caught up in anxiety. Of course, another way of looking at Virgo can be a wish for things to be sorted and perfect. And this is a kind of a fool's errand, because things are never perfect. Only divine things are perfect. So enjoy the imperfection of things. It's a bit messy. You're recreating relationships at this stage. Let things come and go, and see that a lot of your life will be very, very different as Jupiter moves up into the 10th house and offers you a whole new perspective on what your ambitions are and what kind of work that you do. In the meantime, this is also in a trine to your first house of self, especially if that's your rising sign, but it would trine your sun and moon as well in Virgo, especially around the 18 to 24 degree point. And so you really are in a good position. You're in an opportunity to change the future, but you need to take action based on what you sense is possible for you, not based on any perceived sense of I'm not good enough, or I have to figure this out all by myself, because that relationship energy causing this seventh house new cycle of 2 years is changing really rapidly, and I don't think you're going to be all by yourself for very much longer. I would need to see your natal chart to see that for sure, but I suspect that things are going to change in new ways quite dramatically, as long as Saturn is having its way while Jupiter is in your 10th house as well. So good luck, Virgo. I wish you all the best. I'll see you in the next video. And Libra, this is happening in your 8th house, and the 8th house can have something to do with your inner workings, your unconscious patterns, your unconscious fears, or your way of relating to things that are intimate to yourself that you don't necessarily divulge to other people. It can also be other people's money. It can be money that you get from the work that you do, because we're looking at Jupiter right now that is ruling your sixth house of work. And so you might be finding that through, especially if you do client work, and a lot of Libra risings work with people in all kinds of different ways, that you are benefiting in some way from a new source of client income, money that can come through other ways as well, potentially through partners, because Venus, which is ruling that conjunction in your eighth house, is in your seventh house of partnerships. Venus herself is ruled by Mars, which is in your sixth house of everyday work. And so we're looking at a kind of an influence of perhaps business partners or partners that you might work with in terms of employees or colleagues that you connect with and that are bringing some kind of benefit. The eighth house is also inheritance, money that comes from other people. That may be something that comes through. It's not going to be, of course, the case for everybody, but it can also be money that comes around taxes. Now, this can also show up in terms of money that needs to be paid, that money is owed, for example, because we're looking at Venus and Mars not being in terribly good dignity, or at least not in their best happy places. They won't be there for a couple of weeks. Maybe you're already, I know in the States, I think you have to do your taxes now. I can't remember. Maybe I've got the date wrong. Maybe it's March. But anyway, this is the kind of tax season. And so maybe you're just sweating it out as you're listening to this and getting your taxes done. I don't know. So hopefully you'll get a rebate. And anyway, you've got Jupiter moving into your fifth house for a long, long time to come now. And that is in a square to the sun in the eighth. And so from the fifth to the eighth, we often have issues around intimacy, sexual intimacy, and this can be around a new relationship, somebody new that you're meeting, because of course Venus is your ruler and she's in the seventh house. You also have the moon in your first house. Now the South Node is there. What that means is not necessarily that you won't be able to meet somebody or that you're kind of you're on the benches for this season, but rather it means that you need to change. You need to change personally in order to get what you want, where the North Node is in the seventh house. You need to adjust your behavior. And so, especially with that square from Pluto to the eighth house sun, where the sun just moved into Taurus, you might be finding that there's some way that you can express yourself naturally. With Pluto in the fifth house, you have a sense of needing to be seen, needing to be acknowledged, or needing to show up in a way that is uniquely yours. And that allows you to operate from a place of maybe more authenticity in relationships where you're not people pleasing. So this could be one fantastic way of changing the way that you are in relationships. I apologize for my dog. I think my guest who's here this weekend has just come home, but she's fine otherwise. She's just making some noise. And so this looks really, really good that Pluto is trining the moon. And so once again, you personally are involved with this fifth house of self-expression and creativity and how you show up in the world. Are you giving yourself permission to be different? This is the invitation of Pluto while it's in the fifth house. This can also have something to do with children, either children that you plan to have or that you decide not to have, or children that you already have. And of course, that will be strongly influenced by Pluto going through that fifth house. In the square to the sun, there may be some financial responsibility around any of these things, whether it be relationships in general or children in particular. And of course, issues around sex and marriage and love and an expression of all of that will be very, very active in your life going forward. Over this cycle. This will be a very big theme, remember, for the longer cycle, not just in this moment. And of course, also just in this moment. So get a picture of what's going on for yourself now, and you'll see how things are moving forward. So Libra, be yourself, show up beautifully, and make the most of this transit. See you in the next video. Scorpio, you're having this happen in your seventh house. And so there's quite a lot of dynamism around relationships for you. And there has been for, of course, a very long time, because Uranus has been there in the seventh house since April, May of 2018, permanently so since April, May of 2019. And that's already shaken up your relationships quite dramatically. I've spoken about this in lots of videos, but here we're having it expanding into something very different with the Jupiter connection to Uranus exact now on the 20th or 21st, and the sun now moving into your house of relationship, where there's something very new and very vibrant going on in the way that you're connecting in relationships. Your ruler is in the fifth house. It's just started a new cycle with Saturn last week, and it's moving away from that conjunction. And your ruler is ruling Venus in the sixth house, which is ruling this seventh house conjunction. And so something here has to do with your work, your personal goals in terms of how you express yourself, how you show your creativity, how you show up in the world, how you want to be in your creative expression of self. It could be around sexual expression as well. We also might see something to do with work colleagues or connecting with people through employer relationships. For example, I would need to see your chart. But work is playing a role in this for sure, because your ruler, Mars, it has just got its instructions from Saturn, and that can be construed as the house of entrepreneurship. It's in a trine to you. And so there's something really new and dynamic that's coming through this energy. Could also involve children, whether you have them or not, whether you'd like to maybe start a family, or you're thinking of how, your kids are now moving out and how am I going to show up in a new way because of that. This is all very much part of this dynamic. It would depend on the natal chart naturally. But Pluto is also in your fourth house and squaring your sun. And so whatever's going through the fourth house, meaning either property or where you live, the actual house and home, but also your psychological home, what you need to feel secure, what you need to feel happy, that's in a square to you. So that's changing quite dramatically. That itself is going to change your relationships, and especially so as the sun is there in the seventh house. And so you will find lots of changes by opposition and square in these angular houses. We notice these changes that are happening. So Scorpio risings are definitely going to have quite noticeable shifts in the next 14 years around issues of work and relationships. Again, it can be intimate relationships, one-on-one kind of intense friendships, or spousal relationships, or spousal type relationships, or it can be client type relationships or business house. The seventh house is also very strong at this moment with Venus in the sixth house of work. So there's a lot going on in your everyday life. Now, I want to also emphasize that there may be something around health that you might need to look into. I wouldn't want to say that for everybody, but do keep in mind that that things might be a bit murky. You're not so sure. The nodes are there, but also because we've got Mercury retrograding back into the node, and then Venus with Chiron in your sixth house. And then, of course, the moon is opposite from your 12th to the sixth house. The moon is opposite from the 12th to the fifth house where Neptune is. Now, again, don't look at the degrees because they're wrong right now. The moon was at the very end of your 11th moon in Mercury ruled Virgo on the 20th, and then just moving into Venus ruled Libra on the 21st, in opposition to Neptune. So confusion around this time, not very clear, things not very certain around this time, but very probably involving something that might be brought to your awareness around what it is you need to change in terms of your everyday habits, or how you show up, or how you take care of your overall health. And it can also be that you have to move or change jobs also for either mental or physical health reasons. Or the opposite can happen, where the job or the relationship or some kind of partnership changes, and then that can have you stirring up issues around your well-being and health. So you just focus on that resilience with Pluto moving through the fourth house, and that new cycle of Mars Saturn in the fifth house of being yourself, showing up in a way that is that's true to yourself, being honest with yourself, being true to yourself, and that will bring you the solution, let's say, to the problem, if that is indeed a problem. So Pluto is trining that moon from the 4th to the 12th. So it does look like there may be some moves for some of you, and those moves can be potentially to faraway lands. Of course, that's going to be applying to some of you statistically speaking, but that's what the astrology says as well. The moon represents home, It can also be something to do with a mother figure as well. And again, the health of your mother might be the story rather than your own personal health, since Venus, which rules that moon in the 12th, is actually in the 6th house. So, right. So, Scorpio, look out for lots of change, and that will be in your working life in terms of your partnerships and your perhaps marriage or marriage type relationships. And that is really a big topic for you over the next 14 years with your personal self-expression, since your ruler is in the 5th house, your personal self-expression, your personal creativity, your personal sort of finding joy, finding your happy place. That is the place to keep your focus to solve the any insecurities that you might have around the change. All right, good luck with all of that. Sagittarius, this is happening in your 6th house of everyday work. Now, you are ruled by Jupiter, just like Pisces, you're ruled by Jupiter. And as Sagittarius is an expansive sign, very optimistic, very gung-ho, you might have some big plans in terms of work, in terms of how you experience your work or your sense of what your job entails or what your everyday life looks like. That might involve some kind of moving as well, because Jupiter also rules your 4th house of home. So it rules your 1st house of self, especially if you're Sagittarius rising, but also the 1st house, 1st solar house and 1st lunar house as well for the sun and moon. And so we're looking at a potential move again, or the move being related to work. And at the very least, whatever you're changing or whatever the new thing is that is happening around work can bring you a sense of more stability and security. We have this new conjunction of Saturn and Mars in your 4th house, and that's going to bring you an opportunity to stabilize something over the next 2 years. And then, of course, keep in mind that this is a 14-year cycle that is changing your everyday life, the quality of your everyday life. Now, the sun also is a karaka, or the representation of work, your career in general, as well as yourself and your solar consciousness. But it's all there. The sun and Uranus and Jupiter, all there in your 6th house of everyday work, working with colleagues, the sense of purpose and drive that you have. And it's really helpful. It's really important for Sagittarius to have a sense of purpose in work. The one thing I would say is be careful of overworking, because that's also possible, and having that sense of never really stopping. This is a very important thing to keep in mind, because with Jupiter Uranus in there, you might be entering into a cycle where it just feels like it's never ending work. The work can also be in the shape of things that you need to take responsibility for. That can be like the stuff that creates tension or discomfort, or something that requires your attention. It's ruled by Venus, and so that depends on the quality of Venus in your natal chart, the 6th house for you. And yet we can also see that it might be something to do with renegotiating or negotiating contracts or new things. It could be a rental agreement, since Jupiter is also ruling the 4th house, or it could be about how you renegotiate or negotiate a job contract. Pluto is in the 3rd house. Now, Pluto in the 3rd house is fantastic for changing your sense of what you desire in terms of what you're able to change, or what you'd like to try and change in your life. And Pluto in the 3rd also brings you to a place of courageous talk. You engage in a way which is full of integrity and honesty, or at least you try. That's where you're going to with Pluto. It's a process, let's face it. And so where you might learn to be more powerful in the way that you communicate, speaking with gravitas, speaking on issues of importance, or at least importance to you. And that Pluto is squaring the sun. And so perhaps there's something that you need to revise or speak about or clarify with regards to whatever contracts or obligations or challenges you might be facing through the 6th house. Again, that can also be with reference to just the nature of the job. The 3rd house is communications of all kinds. It's also things like internet and business contracts, commercial enterprises, and so on. And Saturn is ruling that Pluto from your 4th house, also ruled by Jupiter in your sixth house, it might mean that you've decided, actually, I want to work from home or start a home business or start a business on the internet, because Pluto's in the third, representing those things like websites and internet and stuff. But also we have the moon up in the 11th house, and that's in opposition to Neptune from the 20th to the 21st. It's no longer in orb in this particular chart because I'm just moving the chart along. So don't look at the degree of the moon. That's not what I'm referring to, but it was in opposition in late part of your 10th house and the early part of your 11th house. And so if you are thinking about a home business or doing something that feels more connected to where you live, or what makes you feel more kind of grounded and secure, this is a great new cycle that you're beginning. You may not have all the pieces, just let things kind of settle before you take any decisions. And you might find that if you wait until Jupiter goes into your 7th house, which is a very commercial sign, in opposition to your 1st house, and especially as you wait for Mercury to, which rules that 7th house and your 10th house, to station direct and even move a little bit beyond the shadow phase in the middle of May, you might find that you'll then be ready to tackle some new ideas around partnerships, work, career, and more future-focused things. So go back to January, and that was when the sun met up with Pluto on the verge of your 2nd and your 3rd house. And so now you're looking at things from your day-to-day perspective, the perspective of work, as Jupiter and Uranus conjoin, and getting inspiration around that based on perhaps something that you already had to deal with as a new kind of cycle between the Sun and Pluto in late January. So good luck with all of this, Sagittarius. I will see you in the next video. Capricorn, this is happening in your 5th house, which is really nice. You've got a trine then from the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction to your 1st house of self, and especially if you have either your ascendant sun or moon at anywhere between sort of 18, and I'm going to give it 25 degrees. Let's go with 25 degrees of your sign. Or of let's say Scorpio or Leo in your 8th, or of course your 2nd house as well, Aquarius. And so any of those will produce some really interesting developments for you. But just if I read this from the house point of view, Jupiter, Uranus in the 5th house can have you feeling really interested in some new way of expressing yourself, whether that be through a hobby or something creative, or through an entrepreneurial enterprise. Again, that depends on your natal chart, or something through your children. Again, perhaps a decision to have or not have children. But as your ruler Saturn is in the 3rd house and ruled by Jupiter, which is in that 5th house, this can very much have something to do with your everyday kind of work life. Business is really well aspected at this point in terms of business that you might develop on your own as a potentially even as a home business, because Mars is there in the 3rd, ruling your 4th, and the North Node is there as well. Now, this could, of course, have something to do with moving because your children are moving out, or moving to a bigger place because your children are growing up and they need more space, or something like that. This is another way that the connections can be made there. The sun is in the 5th house, and so there's definitely a new sense of what it is you want out of your work, the sun representing your work. And especially because Saturn, your ruler, is in the 3rd house, ruled by that Jupiter, you might have new goals. You might have a new, and Capricorn, you're all about goals. You need to have a goal, or you just don't want to get up in the morning. And you'll create the goals. You'll find, you'll just throw up a wall to climb it over. And so this is a great time for you to recognize what you're capable of, what you'd really like to see, how you want to move forward with your ambitions. And that can include commercial ambitions, or it can just simply include a new way of communicating with the people around you, around different things. This can be also teaching qualities, of course, Jupiter representing teaching, Saturn, your ruler, in the 3rd house of education. That is entirely possible as well. That's one way that this can manifest. And then we have Pluto in your 2nd house of money and self-worth and your values. So that all of that is changing right now. I've spoken quite a lot about Pluto in the second house for you. You can look back on Pluto videos over the last couple of years to see what that means for you. But Pluto squaring the sun in the fifth house is a new sense of values around perhaps what makes you happy. What it is that you want out of money, or how you want to earn money, and maybe also connected to children. You might feel somehow constrained to earn more money, perhaps because of children. It can go that direction as well. Or maybe there's a feeling of your values are changing, or the money around you is changing because your children are changing, and maybe they're more independent, moving out of the home, as I said, and so that can be changing as well. But the second house, Pluto, can actually bring you great wealth. It does depend on the quality of your ruler, Saturn. Depends, of course, on a number of other things, like the condition of different money houses and the condition of your natal Venus and Jupiter as well. So I can't say that that's guaranteed to happen, but certainly the potential is there if that's the ambition. The second house also is with reference to family in general, things that support you. So your family is one of those things. And we do have a lot of activity around home and family for you. And as the third house represents also siblings and cousins and extended family, there may also be quite a lot of change around that and issues that need to be dealt with in terms of all of those things. That's also your local space, so your neighborhood, and maybe there's a new cycle there that's going to be impacted also by that North Node in the fourth house, which is where we find Venus, which is the ruler of this conjunction in your fifth house. And so there's definitely something really shape-shifting around what home feels like, around where you want to be home, what you are considering around work as well. Your ambitions are changing. Your goals are new and different. They don't add up to what you felt before. That it's no longer relevant. It doesn't feel like what it is you want to do anymore. Now, the moon is in your 10th house along with the South Node. So that's, of course, a fleeting part of this, but it is part of the actual imprint of this conjunction. But that moon has been in opposition to Neptune at the end of your 9th house and the very beginning of the 10th house. So the 9th house is where you have a sense of your purpose and what you hope for yourself and what you hope for this life, what meaning you find in life, what you have faith in, what you believe in. And of course, the 10th house is how you express all of that out in the world. You take all of that idea of what you're here for and you bring it out into the 10th house and you open the front door and go. And so there's a lot of confusion around that. And so we have Neptune still in your third house, where the goals may be new, but there's still a sense of confusion around that, or how to manifest it. Perhaps the goals are more clear, but how to deal with it is the bigger question. So don't worry about it. With your Jupiter and Uranus conjunct in your fifth house, the sun is also there in a trine to your first, in a trine to the ninth. This is very fortunate energy. It's stabilizing earth energy. And you will find a creative way of solving this and moving yourself forward in a way that brings you happiness and satisfaction. So good luck with all of that, Capricorn, and I'll see you in the next video. So here we are with Aquarius, and Aquarius, this is happening also in an angular house, the fourth house of home and family and your lineage and your property, the immovable property, the land and house that you might live in or that you might own for an investment, for example. And that's a very powerful place to have this conjunction, because that means that the aspect of that foundation of your life is changing, and it can be changing in a way that's extremely inspiring. Very different, very novel. Venus herself is ruling this from the third house. So there does seem to be some change that is related to your neighborhood or related to the people around you, or to even your sense of goals, what you want to do, perhaps even also around skills and things that you might need to bring to all of this. Mercury is backing up into the North Node. Also, that's the house of communication, where Mercury is very strong in principle. And so there's a lot of thinking and conversing and connecting around ideas and around new possibilities, new contracts, new agreements with people, a new desire to develop a skills. Maybe you're reflecting on, what do I need to actually adapt? Do I need to I don't know, take up sewing or some other practical skill, because the third house is practical. It's stuff that you can really do and also earn money from it. It's also musical, by the way. Your ruler Saturn is in your second house of beauty and creative arts and so on. And then that Venus also represents that in the third. And then you've got Mercury there in the third, which represents the manual skill and talent that you bring to things like music and fine arts and so on. So perhaps maybe you're getting all into inspiration around developing skills around artistic expression. Um, Either way, this is going to be something that you will remember, because it's going to change your house and home, so the quality of your home, the nature of who's in the home, and also perhaps even your connection to what home means to you. Now, Pluto is also in your first house, so you're anyway changing. This is going to be changing all aspects of your life as you change over the next couple of decades. And that's in a square to the sun, which is in the house of home. But Pluto started off at this point just inside your first house in January. So whatever that new thing was for you around, probably around your birthday time, and so especially around the later degrees, so around the end, so that would be the end of Capricorn, the very beginning of Aquarius, which is like the 18th till the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd of January, let's say. That would be around the time where that eclipse, that conjunction was super strong. If you have a birthday around that time, or if you have a birthday around this time and Aquarius is your ascendant, for example, then this is really, really potent for you. There's a lot of change with regards to home that it might also apply to where you actually live, where you want to be physically. We also have your ruler Saturn with Mars in the second house, having just started a new cycle. And that new cycle will be around money and your income, property that is movable, the stuff that you appreciate or value, the things you find important. That also can connect you to your family, how you connect to what is your relationship to your family. Now, of course, your modern ruler is also Uranus. And so Uranus plays into this. And if you subscribe to that, I tend to work with the traditional rulerships, but go ahead and use Uranus if that speaks to you. And so we do see that there's a connection very strongly between all of these elements of what supports you, issues around money and income, savings perhaps, or investments, and property, big time property, land and home and things like that, or your family and the needs of your family. And you might also, you're one of the signs that might benefit from thinking about working from home, in terms of your ruler being in a money house, with the change anyway coming through you, and then all of this new fresh energy that's coming through the fourth house, where working from home would suit you really well. Mars rules your 10th house of career, and it's there in your second house of money, ruled by that Jupiter in your fourth house of home, and which is in turn ruled by Venus, which is in the third house of commerce and business and exchanges of all kinds. And of course, Venus is, or rather Mars is ruling that Venus from your second house, and on and on and on. Venus is also ruling the moon up in your ninth house of your sense of purpose. It was just over the edge of the 8th to the ninth house on the 20th to the 21st, but that was in an opposition to Neptune. And the moon opposite Neptune is a little bit hazy on the details. It can be where things are not very clear, so difficult to know. And this, in this case, it can be around money, especially for the 20th. That lack of clarity can translate also into a lack of clarity around your sense of purpose, which anyway is changing because the South Node is in the ninth house. This might have something to do with spiritual or religious or other types of beliefs, whether they might be political or anything like that. All of this is changing quite a lot based on a feeling like you don't really know anymore, or even to the point where you're like past the point of caring, because Neptune is also a bit like that. Neptune is like, oh, for God's sake, enough is enough, especially probably if it's around politics. I totally sympathize. And so also the ninth house is about foreigners and foreign lands and stuff like that. And so you might also have this something to do with an opportunity or some other way of reaching out, whether it be through studying abroad or earning money abroad or teaching, higher learning. All of those things are maybe on your mind in terms of what it is that you don't feel is relevant anymore, but you're not quite sure what the next thing brings. But have no fear. You will be absolutely acting upon something in the weeks to come, which will probably feel more stable and more secure once Venus moves into your fourth house, which she rules, and once Mars moves into your third house, and that's more like May. So give it a little while. Enjoy the unsettled nature. Stir things up a little bit because you are another fixed sign. And although everybody gives you all this kind of wacky, airy-fairy kind of interpretation, no. Aquarius are very conservative fundamentally, and change, it does not come easily. So finally, we also have, there was one other thing I wanted to highlight. Yes, the trine between Pluto and the moon. So again, this chart is now moving forward in time. It's now on the 22nd, so ignore that and ignore the degree of the moon. But Pluto at the time of this conjunction was trining the moon from the 1st to the 9th, or rather from the 9th to the 1st. And so that is also suggesting that you have new feelings around you feeling different. Your aspirations, therefore, are different. Your sense of what you believe is different. Your sense of maybe your spiritual nature also changing. And that would have anyway been very much the case as the last 15 years had Pluto going through your 12th house of all of those aspects of your inner experience of life and your more spiritual side. So finally, one more thing here for Aquarius, which is that Jupiter and Uranus together, in as well as the Sun in the fourth house, especially with that Sun square Pluto, might be pulling up some understanding around your family and your family lineage. And so there may be some things that you're realizing, or that you might be gaining benefit from, or that might be changing your picture based on stuff that is beyond your control, simply because it's ancestral or family related, and or parental, and related to things that have already happened. And you're just now having to grapple with it, or it becomes something that you become aware of, and that gives you an opportunity to move forward in a different direction. So I'm going to leave it there, Aquarius. Thanks for listening to this point. I really appreciate you following the videos. If you're still with me at this point, thanks for watching. And be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because otherwise you will not see the things that are coming up. And I will be having a live session. I will do a maximum of 12 readings, which I will choose at random. And so I will do that on Friday. No, I will do that on the day of this conjunction, Sunday even, the 21st of April. And I will do that for any 12 people chosen at random in that moment. So please don't send in your birth details by email. I will just choose them on the fly. And keep in mind, I will absolutely need your reliable exact time of birth and your date and place of birth. And that way I can create a chart for you. Without that information, I'm not able to make a chart. And so I wish you all a fantastic, exciting change ahead. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.